Hello ladies and gentlemen. Since we had a lovely 4-day weekend, I just wanted to make this quick video on cell organelles to recap a little bit about what you were supposed to learn about last class, in addition to giving you just a little bit more information for this upcoming week. So last week we learned about plant cells and animal cells. You have that argument-driven inquiry lab you're working on to determine the identity of the unknown cell. We, however, are animal cells, so we're going to mostly focus on those today. So we learned about the organelles, or the little pieces inside of the cells, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about their functions, or what they do. Their functions roughly kind of fall into 3 different categories, which I'll talk about now. First things first, proteins. One of the main jobs of every single cell in your body is to produce proteins. Now you can think of proteins as kind of being like Lego blocks. They literally make up everything inside of you. They are responsible for the color of your skin, the pigment in your hair, your toenails. Insulin floats around in your bloodstream and is responsible for helping you to digest things, sugars mainly. Hemoglobin attaches itself to your red blood cells and is responsible for helping bind oxygen to your red blood cells when you breathe. So proteins are incredibly important, and it is one of the primary jobs of the cell to produce proteins. Now, we're going to talk a bit more about this when we get to our DNA unit, but protein production cell-wide kind of works like this. Inside of your nucleus, you have your DNA, your blueprints, your instructions. That DNA, through a very complicated process, is converted into a different format, which then floats outside of the nucleus. And then these little buggers right here, these ribosomes, will latch onto it. Now, this picture doesn't show it very well, but ribosomes also kind of float freely. But there are lots of ribosomes hanging out on this structure right here. This structure is the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER for short. And you'll notice that it's got 2 parts. Kind of like the old jingle, ruffles have ridges. The rough endoplasmic reticulum has ribosomes. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum does not. Anyway, so the ribosomes latch onto this information, and these guys are our assembly workers. They start trucking out these proteins, these complex molecules. They travel along the ER. It's like a little highway, at which point they kind of come out the other side, and then our Golgi apparatus, or postal service, if you will, kind of receives these guys, and then they will package them, they will store them, they will process them, and they will prepare them for delivery. At which point the Golgi apparatus will help form this little guy right here that's called a vesicle. And then that vesicle, what it'll do is it'll travel to the edge of the cell, and it will actually fuse itself with the cell membrane, and then release these packaged proteins either into other parts of the body or into other cells that are nearby. So protein production, again, to recap, involves the nucleus, ribosomes, the ER, or endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi apparatus, and then a vesicle. And keep in mind that all of this nothingness around here is that lovely cell substance, the cytoplasm, so technically that is also involved. The next category we're going to talk about is energy, and this one is in fact so important that we have an entire unit dedicated to it. Now there are 2 organelles that are primarily responsible for energy, first one being the chloroplast, the second one being the mitochondria. It could be argued that this tiny little organelle, this chloroplast, is one of the most important organelles in the world, and without it there wouldn't be a single living thing. This chloroplast has a really important job. It converts solar energy, sunlight, into chemical energy, known as sugars. Has this kind of fun internal structure we'll talk about more. But for now, all you really need to know, takes sunlight, turns it into sugars. Then what happens is this other guy, the mitochondria, will take those sugars and break them down further into a type of energy we can use. Like I said, this is so important. We have a whole nother unit coming up on it later this year. Finally, this last category is a bit fluid. I kind of categorize it as structural support, but a lot of these organelles do more than just provide structure. Our first organelle here, we've got a close-up of the cell membrane. We'll learn more about that later this unit. Again, could be argued one of the most important organelles, because without it, all these different organelles inside of the cell would just float away. Now, in addition to this, plant cells have a cell wall. Now, we do not, but plant cells do. This provides them further support and structure. So this is how we can get trees that are hundreds of feet tall without falling over, is because they have this rigid cell wall in between cells. Now, plant cells also have a central vacuole. Please do not be confused. We as humans also have vacuoles, however, they are much smaller. The primary function of a vacuole is to hold liquids, dissolved solids, things like that, but in the cell they also supply structure, because this large central vacuole will take up about 80 to 90% of a plant cell's volume internally. And so when it gets really hot out and the plant cell starts drawing water from this for all of the functions it needs, this shrinks and the plant cell shrinks and all the cells in the plant shrink, and so the plant wilts. So the central vacuole for plants is also needed for structure. I'm going to scooch over here next to this. It's kind of hard to tell what it's showing, but it has these microtubules. This is actually attempting to show you the cytoskeleton. So there's a very complex network inside of the cell made up of these things called microtubule filaments. And basically all I really want you to know is they hold on to some of the larger organelles and keep them in place, such as the mitochondria and the ER. So these are also providing support. And then finally, this last guy that looks like a churro, this guy is our centriole. This is only found in animal cells, and this guy kind of teams up with the cytoskeleton to help in cell division, so in cell reproduction. So that's our quick little recap for organelles. If you have any questions, raise your hand and let me know. Thanks, guys.